Welcome back to the Impact Storytelling Podcast. I'm your host, Sabine Probst-Saavedra, Ocean Conservation Storyteller and Organization Director. And today I'm joined by Jessica Giannoumis. She's a marine social scientist and passionate advocate for our oceans. With a PhD in marine innovation and blue growth from the University College of Cork, she works at the intersection of science, community, and industry to explore how we can build a more sustainable relationship with the sea. Currently, Jessica is the Aquatech Community Manager for Hatch Blue in Ireland, where she helps connect startups, researchers, and industry leaders to drive innovation in aquaculture and the blue bioeconomy. Beyond her professional role, she's an enthusiast ocean explorer. Whether she is whale watching, snorkeling with dolphins and sharks, surfing in Ireland's coast, or simply sharing stories that spark curiosity about the marine world. For Jessica, the ocean isn't just a subject of study, it's a source of inspiration, adventure, and solutions for the future. Before we jump into this episode, if you enjoy the Impact Storytelling podcast and want to support it, you can now do so via Patreon. There, you can see guest announcements ahead of time and propose questions for the interview. Thank you so much for your support. Let's start the conversation. Welcome to the podcast, Jess. It's really nice to have you here and talk with you. You're a marine social scientist. Can you explain what this is?
Of course. Thanks for having me. So, a marine social scientist is somebody that looks at the intersection of people and how they use the ocean. So, both in terms of going to the beach for a beach walk, going for a swim, or, like just doing your regular cruise ship if you're into cruising. Um, but the other side of a marine social scientist looks at the policy development and how we actually operate with marine resources, how we use them, and how we can use them in the future to make sure that they're sustainable in the future.
This sounds really interesting. How did you get into this field?
In 2014, I got this great opportunity to help a research team in the Azores. So we were in the water and on the water all day long, and we got to count the whales and the dolphins and the turtles that were around. And on one day, we had about 200 false killer whales come along the channel. And it was just so amazing to see them and really make eye contact with the animals and just experience that from an opportunity and from a viewpoint that you rarely get to see. Now, the next day, we had a huge cruise ship coming into the harbor, and our whales were gone for 3 days straight, meaning that coastal tourism, all the companies that actually rely on the wildlife for their income and that rely on, being able to see the animals, they had 3 days of very little activities and very little income. So in my head, there was this idea that was sparked in terms of what is happening, why is it happening? How do we protect the animals on the one side, but then also how can we make sure that people that actually rely on the ocean that they have their resources protected, right? So in this inter in this space between the marine environment and the impacts that it has on humans, my head was just spinning and I knew I had to do something. I had to learn more about what I could do, but then also what we collectively as people could do to protect the resources, but then also make sure that we have income.
Mm, yeah, it's definitely an important field. And when you just said cruise ship, there was just something in my head that I've read like a couple months ago. But there are some cruise ships now that are electro powered. Are they any better in the ocean than the normal ones, or is that also not so great because for the sourcing of the batteries, a lot of natural resources are also needed and they have to be exchanged faster? I know that's not really what you're studying, but it was
No, but
just in my head.
it's
Maybe you
part
have
of the
some experience.
question. It's absolutely part
Yeah.
of this understanding. Are they better? For the animals, I would argue yes, because they're much quieter, right? So the
Mm,
less noise that you introduce at every cruise ship, any ship, or anything that is in the ocean has some kind of noise or sound pattern. there's a difference between what is noise and what is sound, right? And sound is just any like any ambient sound that we have. Noise is when it actually disturbs your activities. So, is a electric powered cruise ship better? Probably from a sound perspective or from a noise perspective. From the other perspective, in terms of sourcing resources, arguably not. But, it kind of depends with anything that you do in the ocean. And that is why I am a marine social scientist and why it interests me so much. There will always be a trade-off. Whatever we do in the ocean, for example, if you are a hotel that wants to look out at the ocean, you need water resources, you need building materials, and all of that. But by doing so, if you're very ethically in tuned, you could think about, well, I'm creating jobs. So, how can I create jobs that are sustainable, but make sure that whatever resources I use are not overextending the resources that we have here? So, it's that trade of what can I do that I can do responsibly and sustainably, where I can also give back to the marine as well as the people that live in the marine. Very convoluted way of thinking about it, but it's it's so I find it so inspiring because you have so many people that really genuinely want to do good and they want to improve the health of the marine resources. But it's that question of like, how do you do that? And we try. We don't know, but we try. Like,
So when you said building materials, I also just remembered another article that I read was about the oyster shells that are usually discarded once you have eaten oysters or any shell you would eat the inside, that they are now used as building materials as well,
well,
the
there's some
shells.
ongoing research on how to best do that, but it feeds back into a circular economy, right? So, for any resources that you do, and it doesn't matter, or for any agriculture, aquaculture that you do, you will always have the prime material, such as the food, right? And the same for, if you eat a cow, there is a prime material. Is it milk or is it the meat? But then the other question is, what do you do with the rest of the stuff? And so it's so cool to see the research that now looks at the biomaterials, such as oyster shells, and see what you can do. And the companies, they are just so innovative. There is so many, particularly in the UK and in Ireland, that are now looking at these extra materials and are thinking, well, what else could we do with that? Concrete, as in using the shell to grind it up and use it as a like a concrete substitute. Wouldn't that be awesome to walk around and be like, I'm walking on shells right now? Isn't that cool?
Yeah. I was actually recently in Valencia, and I think they had used some shells in the ground, in the floors. But there you could still like see the whole thing, and I was taking photos of it because it's so pretty that they just put it in the floors there.
And I think that is the other part of it. When we look at the ocean, there is a movement that is called blue health. So it is that relationship of when we engage with the ocean, what does it actually do for our well being, for our mental well being, but also for our physical well being? And something like seeing a shell in your everyday life where you mightn't expect it, it does something to you, emotionally, where you just, yeah, just a little bit happier. And I think, again, it's that relationship. Like, how do we make sure that we keep that for generations to come so that they too can enjoy that? And, not just look at the ocean as like, oh, it's just production, it's just a production zone. It's like, no, there is so much more that we all gain from it in our everyday life.
Yeah. So, how did your research then start, and throughout the years of your research, what did you find?
I found a lot. One of so the first research bit that I did was in terms of understanding noise in the water, right? What I learned from there is that there is a human relationship, and that as humans, when it comes to the ocean, we need to make a connection for people that mightn't understand the ocean. So, what we saw there is if you, for example, have a cruise ship or any commercial ship, you slow it down to about, I think, 12 miles per hour. Noise emission is going to go down a lot. but so is carbon emission. And by making that connection and saying you are going to reduce carbon output, it makes a relationship or makes a connection to people that mightn't necessarily relate to the ocean, right? But they understand, well, we need to emit less carbon. So from that, that was my first go-to as I'm like, okay, we have to understand human interactions. I then got to go to India and do some research there. So back then I was living in Norway and I did this research on the Indian and Norwegian project where in the 1960s Norwegian shipbuilders and fishermen, they came to India. And now Norway is such an interesting case because they always looked out at sea. They always understood that in order to really develop their coastal regions, they need to look at the ocean and they need to sustainably use the marine resources that they have. So there's a lot of knowledge that came into technology development and into just in general developing the resources in a way that makes sense to the people. So with their knowledge, they then got to go to India. And India in the 60s was at a pivotal point where they said, we do see the ocean, but we're not using it at the moment the way we could be using it. So having that technology introduction from the Norwegians come into India and then the Indians being able to use that and say like, this is so cool. We don't have to start at ground zero. We have this cool technology. Let's see how that works. That was a really interesting partnership. Now, my research then took place in about, I think 2016, was it? And so I got to travel across like different coastal regions. And it was with this idea of like, okay, there was this project in the 60s. Now it's about 60 years later. How are these communities doing with the technology now? And what I find interesting is that some of the communities that had a Christian background, they actually were thriving with the technology because for them it wasn't a way of income, right? And it was a way of, developing their own personal resources, if you will. But in other communities that have a caste system, it didn't matter that you had the coolest and the best technology that would help you with, like increasing your output. It didn't matter because as a fisher person, you were at the lowest of the caste and there was no way of getting out of that caste. So that understanding that technology doesn't always matter, or it does matter, but that you have to understand the human interaction and the cultural connection, that was just so fascinating to me. And I mean, the other side, the technology that the Norwegians introduced was actually trawling. So that is the other side of it. Understanding how trawling technologies supported economic development, but actually decreased the health of the marine environment. It's just mind-boggling, right? But we didn't know better in the 60s. We know much better now, and there's obviously a lot of movement to move away from trawling and finding other solutions to make sure that we're not harvesting everything, but actually harvesting responsibly and sustainably. So once I had that spark in my head, I knew that for the rest of my life, if I'm so lucky, I want to understand that relationship and I want to help communities to actually develop solutions that are for them and by them, meaning that there is a lot of knowledge within coastal regions that we need to understand. We can't just parachute in from anywhere else and say, like, I have the solution. Believe me, I have it all. We're not like, we're not a traveling circus. That's not how this is meant to be. So it was that urge and that passion to see what coastal regions have to offer in terms of knowledge and in terms of technology and the cultural interplay of it, and then support these communities in any way that we can. And that means from a policy perspective, both on an EU level, but then also on a regional level or a national level, but then also providing resources such as testing facilities and enabling that way of like, you may have a really cool technology. If you are able to test it in, a tank hall where all the environment is controlled, you might then be able to scale that technology in other areas of the sea. So it was that interplay of policy and economic support and then technology support, like that's where I live and thrive.
And I guess in different regions or different countries, there are also different solutions sometimes needed, or people maybe don't have access to things that would is very accessible in other countries or continents. And then I think probably have to adapt it, and that's why it's also important to work with different regions and see what they are needing and what they can use.
100%. And it's that traveling aspect of it, right? So I said it before, the parachuting in doesn't help. But if I have a
Mm.
solution, let's say I have a solution in Ireland that might work in Scotland, they're really close geographically, but
Yeah.
it's that trying to visit the place and saying, okay, I can see your tides are coming in from, from the west. Here is what you do if the tides are coming in from the west. That is it might be something so natural and normal to a person living in the region. But for somebody who is just visiting, they might have a technology and then they can adjust it to exactly that need. And that to me is just so cool.
It's the same with the filmmaking I do. If I see that there is something somewhere in the world, then I obviously have to go there. I have to talk with the locals and with the people that are living there their whole lives or living there a long time and seeing what's going on every day. I cannot just come and tell them, oh, this is how I want to do this impact film for you without knowing what's going on there, just what I think is going on there. So it's really important to connect with the people and with the ecosystem there and to understand it really to make a positive impact for them and for the environment.
And you make an important point there. The stories that people tell. Sometimes they don't think that this is an actual nugget of knowledge. But in your field as much as in mine, that knowledge, those stories are actually the ones that we're looking for because the problem that they're facing is in that story, as well as the solution. So to me, like talking to people about their experiences in the ocean is just it's just so interesting and fascinating. I could do it all day long. Like,
Yeah, I can imagine that because with the organization that I founded and with with my films, that's the main thing we do. We share the stories. As the same with the podcast, we share the stories of the people
exactly.
working with and in the ocean. And we hear a lot about innovation these days. It's a real buzzword. What does that mean in the marine world?
That's a really good question. I think I would argue most people are sick of hearing innovation because it just becomes such a filler word. I was like, oh, I have this new innovation. But to me specifically, an innovation is it's either a good or a service or a technology. So it's something very
Mhm.
tangible that can actually improve your production or your system, depending on what you're working on. The important part is that there is an economic support system in there, but the improvement is aligned with sustainability, meaning that in order to be really innovative, it needs to make
Mhm.
sure that the natural resources are used effectively and much better than they are today, but that but that but that there is also an economic output in that, right? So that either means job creation, it means that you need to use less resources, and that could be electricity, for example, or less
Mhm.
water resources. You're just much more effective in the way that you are. So that's why when I hear innovation, I get excited because I have this idea in my head of what it is and what it can do and what it should do. And I hope that people take that away. If there's any takeaway, that's the one that I would want you to take away, that there is an
Mhm.
actual thought process behind what innovation is and what it does to, to protect the limited resources that we have.
And in your work now, what is it that you do now that has to do with innovation?
That is a really good question. And thank you for asking that. So I'm the community manager for Aquatech in Ireland for Hatch Blue. Hatch Blue is an aquaculture knowledge company. So what we do is amazing if you consider that we're only 40 people, but we do consultancy work. We do investments in sustainable aquaculture. We do programs, which is something that I talk about in a second, but then we also support in media output and making sure that the companies are able to tell their stories effectively, right? So what I do specifically is that we work very closely with Bordish Gamara, BIM, which is our Ireland Seafood Development Agency. So it's a state agency that came to us, I think, in 2017 or 2018, and they had this idea of, we understand that in Ireland, we have all of these really smart people that have great ideas. And we have all of these marine resources, but we need support in how do you combine or connect the resources with the technologies. And one way in which we do that is to pick out or support 8 to 10 companies each year, and we give them a crash course or a mini MBA in how do you actually develop your business. So again, it comes back to the people in the companies. They know their technology really well. They understand how it works and why it works, but they might not necessarily understand how it could be applied in aquaculture and how it could improve aquaculture. So it's that learning then in terms of, here's a market opportunity, here is how your solution fits into that, and here is how you, as maybe a small company in Ireland, could make a huge impact on a global scale. And so we do that. We do a lot of outreach for, stakeholder engagement, so that it's not just us preaching to the choir, but we're actually telling the story of aquaculture globally. And we have loads of different programs that look at women in ocean food. So that is specifically geared towards women working in aquaculture. And as you may know, they have even less resources than men in aquaculture. So, particularly in Latin America and in Africa, we have two programs running at the moment. My colleagues are all over that in terms of supporting the women in that field and making sure that they get as much support as humanly possible. We do have programs that focus specifically on blue carbon, for example, and on seaweed development and how we actually capture the carbon and how we do that effectively. And so there's loads of different types of programs that we run. In essence, they're all meant to support startups and scale ups in aquaculture and making sure that they have everything they need to succeed.
And this Aquatech Innovation Studio, what exactly is happening there and how is it shaping the future of aquaculture?
So each year we take companies on for about 2 weeks, and it's intense. It starts at 9 in the morning, it goes all the way till 5 o'clock. That's just where we sit together and we have mentor sessions. And so a mentor session is when somebody, an expert in their field, comes in and they deliver a mentor session about like 45 minutes or an hour. And then it's a Q&A for the company specifically. So we have loads of different companies. As you may know, like there's so many different ways in aquaculture that we need improvement in, right? So aquaculture itself is the fastest growing sector, one of the fastest growing sectors in the world. And that is because of food scarcity and because there needs to be a change, right? We can't harvest everything from the ocean. We need to make sure that however we get there needs to be done sustainably, right? And so where we need innovations, it's anywhere from logistics to like engineering to DNA sequencing of the fish, making sure that they're healthier and that they're not prone to diseases, and making sure that they can actually withhold the challenges of a harsh environment. And the ocean is a harsh environment. No matter how, lovely it is to go for a beach walk, working in the ocean is actually really dangerous. And that's the other part of it. When I said marine engineering, it's making sure that we're not putting lives at risk. And that's a really big, that's a really big point, not only in Europe, but across the world. And now aquaculture is anything from fish to shrimp to to seaweed to oysters. Like there's so many aspects of aquaculture. So there is loads of different opportunities for innovation to come in and actually improve the development of aquaculture. So in the studio, this is what the companies learn: the differences in where their solution may fit, but then also how they can utilize the knowledge that we provide them to make a business case for their solution. And so our next studio is actually in October, in 3 weeks, on 13th to the 18th in Galway. So we're really excited to have the companies in the room. They get to meet each other, they get to meet us, and it's so important to have the face-to-face element of it, and to build those relationships. And then once the studio is over, we have a conference in Dublin where the companies get to pitch their ideas. So there will be investors in the room, there will be government in the room, so that they can actually see the impact that those companies are having locally, but then also potentially globally. And then in the following months, anything that they need, I'm here for them. And that could be anything from providing market insights to sometimes it's cheerleading. Most of the time, it's cheerleading. As in, it's such, as a startup or if you work by yourself, it's such a lonely place. You have so much to do, and sometimes it can feel very isolating. So it's that element of like, how can I help you? And sometimes it's a cup of coffee. At the end of the day, I like coffee. Why not? And so helping companies, and sometimes it's about being tough and telling them, you told me you were going to do this. I need you to do this so that you can then get ready for your next pitch, or that you can get ready for your next trade show, whatever it is. So it's a very interesting job, lots of varied activities, and just being able to work with people and see what they do. It's just amazing. It's really brilliant.
Yeah, and aquaculture is often seen as a part of the solutions of feeding the world sustainably. What do you see as the biggest opportunity in this place?
Oh, there is so many different ways. I suppose it depends on yourself as an individual, of like where you want to make an impact. So you could do anything in terms of marketing, because we do have a lot of young people coming in now. And many of them are like, well, I don't really want to get my hands dirty, but I do like the sector. I do like the ocean. How do I get involved? There is so many opportunities for people that are just coming into school, and they might look at, media production, kind of like yourself, right? You're telling a story. The same goes for marketing needs in aquaculture because they're so specific. So that's one element. The other, I mean, it's really about finding something that interests you, where you think it's a niche market. From an engineering side, there is so much to do. And part of it is like the pens where the fish are getting bigger and bigger, but we only have limited space, right? Close to the shore. And you need a sheltered space, particularly if you do salmon aquaculture, for example. You can't have salmon aquaculture in really rough waters because you need access to the fish. You need to make sure that you can see that they're healthy. If there is, for example, a jellyfish bloom coming in, you need to make sure that you can actually protect the fish. So the engineering side of things looks both at potentially submerging the pens so that they're not always at the top of the water, but sometimes they go lower and then they can come up again, or building robust systems that you can go further offshore with. And with that, again, comes so many challenges, as in, well, how do you make sure that people working in the environment are safe? How do you make sure that the equipment can actually withstand harsh environments? How do you make sure that you can feed them effectively? And if there is an outbreak of sea lice, or if there is a huge jellyfish bloom that could really harm the animals, that you're able to protect them. Because at the end of the day, I know it's a billion-dollar industry, but I can guarantee you every farmer actually cares for the animals. They want to make sure that their fish are healthy. They want to make sure that they're protected. And, they want to make sure that the product itself is a good product. And I think that's the interesting part for me is like it really depends on what you're interested in, but there is a definite need for people in the sector, and there's a definite opportunity depending on your interests for anyone to come in and be part of aquaculture if they so wish.
Yeah, so I'm a bit skeptical still about one part of it. So I definitely think that aquaculture for seaweed is fantastic, whereas the fish farming feels a bit more complicated for me. Because on one hand, obviously, I see how it provides food security, reduces pressure on wild stocks, and support economies. But on the other hand, there are concerns about pollution, disease, habitat destruction, and escaped fish impacting pollutions, even though you just said like the fishers do take care of their fish. And so sure that it's everywhere like that and that it can be everywhere like that. Like I've heard of cases where they would get medicine because the fish weren't doing so good, and when the medicine is obviously also in the ocean. Um, and besides that, they're obviously captured. Personally, I don't like the idea of keeping animals in captivity. And while I understand aquaculture can be crucial in regions that rely on fish for survival, I feel like on continents like Europe, I've seen many fish farms along the Atlantic. I'm not sure if it's the case that we need fish to survive in Europe or in certain countries, and you can totally correct me if I'm wrong, as I'm not an expert there. I just don't like fish in captivity. Um, and I just wonder if the negative impacts sometimes outweigh the benefits, and it would make more sense to research differently more into plant-based solutions instead. And linked to that, I've also recently done an interview about krill and also heard from there that sometimes krill is still used, especially in salmon farms for the color. And krill already is under a lot of pressure from climate change, and now also these huge ships taking so much krill at once. And then it goes into fish food, not only, but also into omega-3 supplements for humans, which we could get out of plants, but which is also a part of aquaculture. We could get it out of seaweed. Um, so yeah, and I was just wondering about your perspective on that. Just from my side as a vegan, and there's someone that really loves animal and doesn't want to hurt any. Um, I'm still a bit in the fence with aquaculture for fish.
And I think you make some really good points there. I think part of it is this whole issue is very complex, right? Because there is both the environment, there's people, and then there is the fish itself, right? So that's already three parts. Now, there's obviously more and more layers that you can put onto this. Now, if I were to respond to one of the things in terms of the health of the animals, it's the policy side of things, right? Particularly in Norway, which is the front runner. Anything that happens in Norway in about 10 years' time, in terms of technology development, you will see in other regions of the world, in particularly aquaculture. So that's the one I'm talking about. Um, so the Norwegians are really strict with their policies because they understand that these resources are not endless. And you can't have billions and billions and billions of fish and thinking it won't have an impact onto the environment. And you can't have billions of fish in a pen thinking that won't make an impact on fish. But it's where the policy comes in. The policy is not a blanket for all kind of this is what I think it should be. It is actually based on both the environment and the environment, like the environmental impact assessment, as well as a lot of fish biologists. Now, for salmon in general, too, or many fish, they do like to travel in circles together. And I think that's the interesting part for fish. What we sometimes think of, like tight environments, if you ever seen a bait ball, and there is loads of big bait balls, you see like that's a physiological response of the fish. That's what they do. They cluster together and they swim in circles. It's not like a dog chasing their tail. Like that's a very different and understanding, like, from a health benefit. Now, when it comes to we could get resources elsewhere, we could, but again, what makes sense to the region? Would it make sense to have seaweed development all across Norway where it's really cold waters, or all across, coastal regions that are not meant generally, or that may have very little or very few seaweed resources? No, because that's not natural to their environment. And we already know that introducing something that is not natural to the environment, even though it could survive, it could have negative impacts for the actual environment that is in there. So much like yourself, I am very much against introducing something uh, completely new to an ecosystem that doesn't belong there. Like that, you could destroy so many things that we haven't even thought about, and where the impact now may be positive, but then in 15 years' time, it's negative, right? So it's a very delicate relationship in terms of like, what can we do and how can we do that? Now, I mean, I posed the question to you. You could get lots of seaweed development from the Philippines. We do, like we right, like seaweed. You could get seaweed all the way across Iceland. There is a lot of different types of seaweed that you can, generate there. Um, and you could also get a lot of seaweed in regions of Africa. But we're coming to the same challenge that we already see in terms of resource grabbing. Are these farmers then being fairly paid for their resources, or are we running into the same issues that we already do with land-based resources? And it's a much bigger question. So I think it is so important to ask the questions that you do. And it is important to be skeptical. And I'm not here to convince you one way or another, because it is a deeply personal relationship with what is happening at sea and how do I feel about it and how do I go about it. Now, in my own viewpoint, there are some places in the world where aquaculture absolutely needs to be improved. There is some places in the world where they're doing their absolute best and it still could be improved. And I suppose this is why I am passionate, because to me, it's improvement potential, but we have the solutions. We just need
Mhm.
to make sure that those solutions are actually implemented.
Yeah, definitely think it's like fish is really important for some places in the world and for the people to survive there, and they rely on it. And there, of course, in a lot of oceans, there's overfishing, and with aquaculture, there might then be less overfishing. So also the small communities where the fishermen are still going out with their little boats, and they can then find fish, which otherwise they might not if everything is already dead because the big trawlers went through, or the other huge ships that just take a lot of fish in once, which a small fisher just can't compete with. And yes, definitely also putting plants or animals in an ocean where they don't belong. We see already the effects where it has happened, and usually it's not really good. So no, that definitely should also not happen. But yeah, I'm still more team plants, and that's also the next question. Where I would like to know a bit more about the aquaculture food plants. And I really think a lot of people are working on it, and a lot of different projects are being done. Like, for example, I heard about seaweed replacing single use plastics through some startups. And I was wondering, I mean, I think it's super cool, but I was wondering how realistic it is that it can be implemented in a large scale. Um, if you think that companies would go for it. If it's already at a research state, maybe where it is not so expensive, because I think in the end it's always about money still. So if something is way more expensive than producing a single-use plastic normal, if that's still way more expensive, then probably a lot of companies won't go for it. But yeah, how realistic is it that there are going to be a lot of sustainable ocean solutions and eco-friendly ocean solutions that are really going to hit the market and bring a big change, a large scale change?
I love that question because as an ocean enthusiast, I'd say we're on the right track for exactly that. As a realist, it will take time. Like, honestly, it will take a lot of time. Um, so I think was it the Berlin Marathon where they used so they used a seaweed alternative to plastic cups so that the runners and like when you run you typically have your fueling stations, so you get water, juice, or bananas and all of that, and instead of plastic cups they actually used seaweed type of casings for the water, so it's like a water bubble um made out of seaweed, and you can drink it, and then at the end of the day you don't have that you don't have the plastic waste there. So now the marathon, I don't remember how many people ran it, but I'd say more than 1,000 people, maybe, 5,000 people, however many, right? So this particular company is already at a stage where they can produce that, right? And what a great platform to say, like, we can easily replace something that you do every day, that you need or use every day. We can easily do that. Cost always plays a role, but, and maybe I might be a little bit blue-eyed about this, but I have this feeling that people have become more environmentally conscious. So companies will actually really try to be more sustainable. And part of this is because they get the pressure from the public that then says, I don't want single use, I want an alternative. And then it's up to that producer to say, I hear you. I want to keep you as a customer because you obviously pay me eventually. So I need to make that conscious step. And we see that in the fashion industry, for example, too. Like most of our clothing is actually made from synthetic colors. So there's a lot of plastic production, if you will, that goes into coloring our clothing. But we now can use technology to actually extract colors from seaweed and then color our clothing through a natural solution. And so one of the companies we worked with, Sea Dyes, last year, that's what they were working on. And so there is solutions coming, and they've got a lot of traction from both high end, but then also, like everyday clothing manufacturers saying like, we want to do this. So obviously they are at a junction where it's like, all right, how do we make that scale up? How do we make that step? So and again, this is where we come in, where we support them in terms of like, what is your decision making here? What is your opportunity? What can you do and where? So the solutions are there. We're working on it. And I'd say more and more solutions will become available. And the cool thing is, there is so many young people, right? And many of us are kind of like, I want an alternative that I can actually stand behind. And they have that passion to make it happen. And they have that drive to actually look and research the solutions, but then really push that envelope and say, this is your alternative now. Let's do it. So I'm
Yeah.
optimistic.
That's great. Yeah, I think also, like you said, with the coloring for the clothes, I think what many people don't realize also what's in your clothes when you wash it, that it also goes into the water. So the material is important. That's also sometimes where I'm wondering. I'm usually buying all my clothes secondhand, and I mean sometimes I buy something like this because I like it. And when otherwise when I look what's in the material because, yeah, there is plastic and it will obviously also go into the ocean. Um, and then when we're talking about the ocean and clothing, um, and ocean trash, I was thinking there are a lot of startups or companies that use fishing nets and then use that to produce clothing. There was also wondering, I mean, fishing nets are not really tested to be on the skin, right? Is that a good idea to have a fishing net like right on your skin? I think like for shoes or something for the so for the bottom part of the shoe. Um, I think there it's really cool because you don't really touch it, but for a swimwear, for example, do you know if that's so?
It should be. Like,
Oh,
and
yeah.
and the reason being is that our rules and regulation in terms of what we can sell that is clothing, just as much as like what we can sell for food, they're very strict. So when you have something that is coming from ocean plastic and like fishing nets and all of that, and you use it on your skin, it has to go through a lot of treatment to get to that stage where it's actually safe for you to wear. So I don't believe that it would have any negative impact on your skin. It's a different thing if you're very hypoallergenic and everything, all of that, then it mightn't feel so comfortable. I don't know. But in general, there is so many steps that come between having ocean trash and having fishing nets and all of that, and making that into material that we use in every day and that we use on our skin every day. So I don't have any concerns about that. If anything, I think it's so amazing to say, if you just imagine there is a fishing net. It could be a ghost fishing net that could have potentially killed a shark or a dolphin or whatever, right? Or fish. Um, and now it's out of the water. And by wearing it and by supporting a company that actually uses those ghost nets and all of that to make material that you can wear, you're actively protecting the ocean. And like, how cool is that?
I think it was a big hype, like, I think it was already 10 years ago with this wristband when it started before the clothing really came out. There was like these little wristbands from fishing lines. And I also had like a couple of them. And so I was like, look what I have extra
Yeah.
from ocean trash.
But
Uh,
see,
so yeah, I think.
that's the other thing. Now, and we touched upon it like earlier in terms of a circular economy. So when you think of a fish, right? And this is hopefully not too graphic. It shouldn't be too graphic, but it's the when you think about it as a food production, typically you just think about the fillet, right? You just think about the
Mhm.
actual meat that you want to eat. But if you have a fish, there is a fish head, there is the backbones, there is the tail, there is the skin, depending on, how the fish is prepared. What do you do with that? Right? And so if you look into Iceland, they are so good at this because this only started within the last 10 years. But they actually use that material that is left over, that bymaterial, to make, for example, like outerwear, I think, but
Mhm.
then also like wallets and like material that you use every day and you need every day
Mhm.
anyways, and they're very durable and also water protected because it's fish. Uh, and so it's one of those like, what else can we actually do with that material? And I think it's a very interesting part right now in terms of the circular bioeconomy, not just think about a product as this is my outcome, but think of the byproducts of that and see what else you could do with that. Oh, I
Yeah.
like it.
With that fish product, I'm just wondering, do they have to use then chemicals to make it last, or is it with just dry it if it's about the skin? Because I'm wondering if they do use chemicals to make it last or to form it, if it's then not worse sometimes for the environment because then you can't really like compost it anymore, recycle it, or I don't know.
That's a really good question. I don't know. That's the honest answer. Uh, I would argue, though, that because they're using byproducts, this isn't, I might be wrong. I might be very wrong. But in my head, I'm like, all right, you're already thinking about it being circular, like being circular in terms of the economy, right? Many people that I've spoken with that are at that stage in terms of where do I want to work with and why do I want to work with that, they actually are very environmentally conscious. So I would I would be surprised if the people that work in those elements or in those sectors would then look at non-sustainable solutions to make a product. It kind of goes counterintuitive if you ask me. Now, I don't know, but that would just be my gut feeling would be they're probably looking at sustainable alternatives in every way to make sure that whatever they produce is actually fully sustainable, which is just so impressive.
What just came from a documentary I've watched, like, I don't know, 1, 2 years ago about leather and how some people say, "Oh, this, I can totally use it, it's just a byproduct," but then it's not really like that, and also there are a lot of chemicals put on it so that you can wear it. So I was just wondering, it's similar like that, and also from my social and sustainable class where my teacher back in university told me, "Be careful when you upcycle something, that you then not make something out of it that you then never can recycle again."
I think that is such an interesting way here, an interesting connection. What I found in my research is that what we do with land based resources, we've done for so many years, right? But we've gotten to a tipping point where we understand collectively that we cannot continue that way. And because we've learned those lessons and we're learning it the really hard way, we really didn't need to be like, we didn't need to be that dense about it. But we learned those lessons. So I I see this movement, and I know that I'm a little bit in a bubble because I get to work with very innovative and very future looking people. But I see this bubble where they say, like, what we've done previously, we know. We take our lessons learned and we actually look at solutions that are alternatives, but that are sustainable because what we've done there is not working. And you see it particularly with young farmers in general, because what is so interesting about them is farmers always find the necessity. Necessity is the mother of all invention. So they find the solution specific to that problem with the resources that they have. And adopting that mindset in every day is just it's just so interesting at what you can come up with.
Yeah. And about coming up with things, what role can local communities and small businesses play in protecting the oceans?
All the roles, everything, honestly. But if I were to think of like a community, what I've seen them do is take pride in the ocean, take pride in like in the resources that they have, and understand why they are the way they are. It's a lot of a knowledge piece. And even in coastal communities, I've seen a lot of people that have lived their whole life in a coastal community, but they understand very little of the ocean. So, number one is education. And it's about observing because there is changes in the sea throughout a year. You could stand on the same spot every single day and it will be different every single day. And that's the beauty of it. Like, understand why the changes are and maybe looking at, okay, well, was it weather changes, was it climate changes, was there any impacts from any other ways, and if there were impacts from other places, how do you prevent them to make sure that the resources are protected. So it's a knowledge piece on one. Number two, it needs to be said out loud. Be proud of the resources and say that to your local government. Say that to anybody that comes through, why it matters and why it matters to you, because passion is the one thing that we all have, and particularly for the ocean it is necessary. It needs to be said out loud. There's so many initiatives, and particularly for the sustainable development goals, there's a lot of initiatives that people can do. And again, that's a coastal community. You can either go in with your government and say, well, what can we do to fulfill life below water, SDG 14, and see like how we can contribute in creating jobs and protecting the resources and, in education. Like, there is loads of different ways. It really coming back to the very beginning of the conversation, it depends on you and your story that you want to tell and the story that you want to leave behind for your future.
Really good said.
Thank you.
Yeah. And I know you're based in Ireland, and what makes this country special in this space?
Oh, it's gorgeous. It is so beautiful. Not only the coast, the coastal region is just so beautiful, but Ireland is actually one of the first whale and dolphin sanctuaries in the world, if I'm not mistaken. So that goes back to the 1990s. So that's now 30 odd years. We have fin whales, we have humpbacks, we have dolphins, we have minke whales, we have blue sharks, we have so many sharks, we have basking sharks. Like we have such a wild ecosystem, such a rich marine wildlife ecosystem. And it is mind boggling how few people in Ireland actually have seen whales and dolphins in real life, even though they're just a stone's throw away from it. And to me, the people in Ireland too, they tell rich stories from the histories and all of that. But when they get to that ocean story, there is just so much love for it here. And I think particularly in Cork is where I'm based, there's such a strong connection to the sea, an emotional strong connection. And there is this will and this strive and this want to use the ocean more sustainably and to protect the whales because we have so many of those, so few of them, but they're just gorgeous to see. And there was one time, it was in the pandemic, which meant very little boat traffic in general. And it was my birthday, which is why I remember it. So I was out at sea and the water was so clear. It was crystal clear, which is rare for like for Irish waters. Typically, it can go very wild out there, and I've been out there on very wild days. But you had like this day was just so gorgeous. We had, I'd say 70, 80 minke whales just popping up. Every time you looked around, it's like there was another minke whale. And then there was these three humpbacks that were just hanging out with us. They were just slowly moving. Like the motor was off of the boat, so we were just sitting there. And they were just cruising along us and they were looking at us and just, that the noise that they make is just so gorgeous. And the same for basking sharks. This year we had I think about 50 or 60 just off the coast, maybe 10 minutes from the pier. So you don't have to go hours and hours. You just go 10 minutes off and you could even kayak there if you wanted to, if you're that brave. And then you have this huge giant shark next to you, and the mouth is just open. And they only eat plankton, so they wouldn't do anything to you. But you just see them, and you make that eye contact, and you're just like, this is so cool. And I think for anybody that sees marine wildlife, there is nothing better than it. Like nothing. I dare you to come up with anything better than being able to actually experience marine wildlife like that. And so in Ireland, I'm so privileged to be able to do that. Go for ocean swims anytime I want, go snorkel anytime I want, go for a surf, just be in the water and really experience that. I mean, Ireland is just amazing in that way.
Yeah, I think I have to come and visit you.
You should, absolutely.
Yeah. It's been a while since the last time I was in Ireland.
Yeah, like come with all the different weather gear. I will say this: some days are
Yeah.
just very rainy and wet, but right now it's really sunny.
Well, it's raining here, so used to that part too. Good rain gear. And I will bring my underwater camera.
Oh, absolutely. Like that, I mean, that's the other thing. We have a really big tide in Cork. So it's about, I think, 6 meter tide, meaning in low tide, you can walk out really far at sea. But then in high tide, when you get all the crabs and you get all the fish and you get like a piper fish that is just hanging out with you because it doesn't want to swim itself, or you go for a dive, and our seals can be very cheeky. They can be very interested in your fins. And if they just, they swim behind you and just chew on your fins, or we have it's just an amazing place to be, honestly. in and off the water, both.
Yeah. I had that experience with a seal before where I thought I got stuck somewhere. I turn around and it's just seal having my thing in its mouth.
And you kind of go like, what do I do now? Okay, we'll just hang out.
I was just like turning. I was like, "What?" And then he just swam away and looked up to me from some kelp.
But way back when you were able to swim with there was a particular dolphin called Fungi. Now, unfortunately, he has passed away just recently, I'd say within the last 2 years. But he was also one where you could swim with him, like not, not touching him or anything, but he was just so domestic in terms of just staying in an area. And sometimes bottlenose dolphins do that. They kind of split off from their pods and they're just solitary. And that's just it's a choice. And so he would just hang out with divers. And, obviously you have to be respectful because it's the ocean. But he would just be interested in who you were and what you were doing. And he would just look at you and just kind of be like, okay, I'm done now. And then swim away.
Nice. Yeah.
Yeah,
It's always nice encounters when the animals come to you, and they're curious what you're doing.
exactly. And like it's again, it's that you build that understanding that they are fragile, right? Even though they're like robust animals, but the marine ecosystem is fragile. And we need to do everything we can to really protect that in every aspect. And I think we're at a point now, thankfully, where that message is clear and people want to make that difference. So for anybody who is unsure what they want to do with their lives, particularly young ones, I'm like, or even if you're older, come to the ocean and play that role. We do need you in ocean protection and making sure that it's there for generations.
Yeah. And talking about a mammal, you told me you've been a marine mammal observer. So what is that? How do you become one? What training do you need? And why is it important?
So I should preface this by saying I'm not a marine biologist. I actually never wanted to be a marine biologist. Like it looked so cool, but it seemed so intimidating to me. It's like, what do you mean? I have to be underwater all the time. And like, what? It's so scary. It's so dark. Like, no, I don't want to do this. But I always had a big passion for big animals. And like I mentioned earlier, being in the Azores and seeing the pods of false killer whales swimming towards you, there's just a love for them there just because they seem so inquisitive and so interesting. So, a marine mammal observer, as the name suggests, observes marine mammals, but it is an actual job, meaning that anytime you have offshore operations, you have an independent contractor on board that makes sure that whatever operations you do in the water are actually not harming the animals. So we would do on research cruises, particularly where you would measure the ground of like the geology of the marine space. You do that with a little bit of a pinger, which means that it's a technology that emits sound to the ocean floor, and depending where the ocean floor is, it pings it back. So then you can track how deep the water is and if there was like any obstruction or any changes over time. So you have to do that quite regularly. So to do that though, before you start, you need somebody on board that makes sure that understands and can see animals because observing and actually understanding if there is an animal in the water is a real skill. So, because, most of the time they're underwater, but there is certain movements that you can track where you can say there is a whale there or there's a dolphin there. It might be a mile off, but I can see it because I'm trained for that. So it's that being on board, learning how to observe animals, learning how to actually spot them, but then also identify them. Because sometimes you only get 2 seconds with an animal, and then you're meant to say, this is a dolphin, right? What type of dolphin is it? What behavior does it have? Is it only one animal? Is it five? Like, it's that thing. So you need to be able to do that, but it's a skill. So anybody that spends time at sea can learn that. And it's badly needed, particularly with like offshore wind development and like making operations in the ocean and like like anything that you do on cruise ships and whatnot. Um, it's a very good job to have. It's good fun. You get to see the ocean all day long. You get to spot them. You get to record them, and you get to record their behavior. And so it's a really interesting. It's an interesting job.
Do you also use photo ID to see if you saw one animal multiple times? Or are you just recording, oh, I've seen a dolphin because you just get such a short glance? Or maybe it even helps, right? If you take a photo, then you can look longer on it than if it just pops up and it's gone again.
Well, if you're really good with your camera and you can actually take a picture when it comes up, yes. Also, I get very excited, so my picture taking sometimes just does this. So I would need somebody like you that can actually keep a steady camera. But in general, yes, we do record them. Any marine enthusiast for their own records has millions of pictures. Do you know, like they do that for their own thing because we're just interested in it and we're interested in looking back and seeing what behavior it is. Now, on a national scale, most countries use some type of recording or citing technology or citing platform, I should say. There is a platform called the Happy Whale. They do that globally. So you can upload your recordings there and they can then kind of spot with their AI, they could probably spot if you've seen the animal before and you know what behavior it was or where was it traveling. Which it's so cool when you see an animal in, in Mexico and then you see the animal in the Arctic. Like that's so cool to be able to say they made it or they came back to, back to Mexico every year. And we do that in Ireland too. We have a sightings website here too. Now, for what I thought was really cool, or it wasn't so cool, but it was still kind of cool. In was it 17 or 18, there was a bottlenose dolphin in Scotland, I think, where it got stranded, it got life stranded. And the sun that day was so bad that the animal actually got sunburned. So animals can actually get sunburned, like any marine animal. And so back then, the people that were minding the animal and then were able to float it again and make sure that the animal was fine. Um, they were unsure if the animal was going to make it because the sunburn was so bad. But then 2 or 3 years later, I was at sea and I was actually working as an MMO, and we saw the animal. And you could tell because the scarring was so specific, but it was healed. It was completely healed. It was just a bit lighter. It's kind of like when we get sunburned and it's like a little bit of a different skin color. And it was just so cool to be able to say, I know which animal this was. I know the hardship that the animal had gone through and that kind of pain, right? Like the sunburn is really painful. And then being able to say, it's alive, it's thriving, it's clearly with its pod, it's having fun. That was just one of the coolest things ever. So that's also why part of the reason why we record it. And the other part is if we see an animal that is in distress, or for example, some of the dolphins, they have their fins might be a little bit they might just be a little bit hurt because they've gotten too close to a propeller or something. We record that too, just to make sure that, if something happens to them, we know the particular animals. And stuff like this makes it much easier to identify them for us because obviously the animals underwater, if you don't know them, they all look the same, but each of them has just something specific. And then you're like, oh yeah, that's the one I saw like 3 days ago, and it's the same animal. And like, okay, I know he's doing well or she's doing well. And so yeah, we do record it particularly to make sure that they're healthy.
That's really nice.
Yeah.
And what advice would you give anyone that wants to get involved in the field of marine social science?
Find the thing that makes you happy. Find the thing that makes you passionate, honestly, because un- like fortunately I believe as a society we're in a position where mostly, now this comes from a place from privilege, but we are in a position where we can do what we're passionate about. And the same for the marine social science. The reason I do what I do is because I love people and because I love the ocean. And I found this very niche job, which honestly I didn't know existed. When I started my PhD, I always said to myself, this is the job I want to do. But I didn't know it actually existed. And so I was then able to use all of my research knowledge, all of the tears and blood and sweat, and actually transform that into something that makes a real impact for the environment, but also for the people. And to me, for anybody that is interested into getting into this field, find that thing that makes you get up in the morning or keeps you up at night, and like focus on that and say like, this is what I want to do, and this is where I'm going to focus on, and this is what, the impact that I will have, because we need as many people as we can. That's just we just need people.
Yeah. But thankfully, there are already a lot of people working on ocean protection, but still needs more
But
and in different areas.
exactly. Like, I mean, I don't want to generalize, right? I probably did a lot already, but there's a lot of, especially younger ones, that want to be influencers, right? Be an influencer. Absolutely. If that's what you're passionate about, go for it, but have a purpose behind it. If you want to be an influencer in the marine field and you want to talk about ocean protection, you want to talk about seaweed, you want to talk about whatever it is in the ocean, there is space for that, and tell that story. Do you know, like, don't think you have to be in this very clearly defined job. No, make your own job, make your own luck.
I think sometimes you kind of have to create your own job already because as a marine biologist, at least I think it's really hard to get a job from what I've heard from the people I've interviewed and the people I've met. But also in my field, I think it's not that easy to have an income from being an ocean conservation filmmaker or a storyteller. So yeah, I think just creating your own job, as I was also, talking with Dr. Joanna Castro, the founder of AIM. She also said she didn't get an opportunity, so she created her own opportunity with founding her organization and, funding her own research, and now has a team and is a great NGO. So, yeah, just believe in yourself, know what you wanna do, and then, try and do it.
And it's that entrepreneurial spirit. Like, it's that I can do it, right? It's not easy. It's just by no means easy. But you're working for yourself. You're fulfilling your own vision. You're creating your own vision. And people are there to help you. And I think this is one of the reasons I love the ocean. So a long time ago, I was talking about, well, I was part of a sea survival group, and you have to have a sea survival certificate in order to do any marine mammal observation. And you renew it every few years and all of that, but it's just so in case something happens at sea, that you're actually prepared for whatever that environment may throw at you. But what we learned is that when somebody is in distress at sea, the closest ship that is there will come and help you. But mostly it's not just that one ship. It's all the ships that are in the area, that will throw all of their resources at helping you because they know you're in distress, and because it's stressful, it's panicky, it's just not a good place to be in, right? And this is why I'm so passionate about the ocean. It's because we have the same mentality. If you're telling me I'm stressing out, I'm freaking out, I don't have this and that and that and that, my first reaction will be, all right, what can I do for you? And I'm again comes from a place of privilege, but I've had so many people in this field who've done exactly the same thing for me. Anytime I was a little bit in a position where I said, "Oh, I don't know what to do now. I'm stressed, I'm confused," they would come and help me without, expecting something in return. It's just part of the ocean mentality. And I work very hard at keeping that alive. It's like, this is what we are, this is what we stand for, to support each other, make sure we're all doing well.
Yeah. Yeah, the support and the connectivity is really nice and good.
Right? Like you said it before, when you go out and you listen to people and they tell the stories, aren't they the most helpful in terms of like, this is a place where you should go for a dive, and this is where you should eat, and this is who you should talk to. Like, cool.
Yeah, for me, it's always really inspirational to see what everyone's working on and that everyone is so driven for, yeah, protecting the ocean and researching animals and finding better solutions on how to help our oceans and our planet. Yeah, this drive you can see, and even though it is really hard and you might have to do other jobs to make money on the side, both to study or until you find a job, um, yeah, it's still not losing hope and still working on what you believe in that has to be done.
100%.
So now, if someone has a great idea for the ocean, a solution, what should they do with that idea? Like, you help support companies. Like, how should they go about it? I have a good idea, but now I don't know how to make it reality.
Talk to me. I have a
Okay.
very easy entry barrier in terms of talking to me. Either find me on LinkedIn or email me at Jessica at hatch.blue and just talk to me. Like any, within a very short conversation, we can figure out what you're working on and in who you should talk to. Like in my head, it's always the if I don't know the answer, I will find somebody that does. So when I then understand what your challenge is at the moment, then maybe you just need some insight into the field, or you may need to talk to somebody that has a different technology solution that you could combine or work together. It really depends on what you need, but give me a shout. I am so happy to listen to anything and just kind of go like, oh, that's interesting. Let's see what we can do. How can we make sure that you can succeed in here? And I say it to all of our companies. Mostly, we want your success more than you do. So we will throw everything at you to make sure that you succeed. And I use that same mentality with anybody that I speak. So absolutely get in touch and let's talk.
Amazing. I will link your profiles below and your email address. And if you had to name one or two key solutions we need to prioritize right now for the ocean's future, what would that be?
We need to do something about the climate change, I tell you. That climate change is just messing up everything. Like, if I had, I mean, that would be my number one thing. We need to address climate change from all aspects, and we are working on it. We just need to be quicker about it, right? And it comes in so many layers. But if we get one of them going, and we are slowly but surely, but if we get going here, we could have a ripple effect for everything, right? The same goes if we don't do anything, it has a ripple effect for everything. But we need to start. And it's both from an energy side, it's from a food perspective, it's from a protection perspective, it's from policy side of things. There's like so many elements that we need to work on. But in essence, keep that in mind. Anything that we do, we need to combat climate change and we need to do that collectively. You can't do it by yourself. But we all together can make that choice. And that is both in terms of vote for the constituencies that will actually make it happen. Make sure that you are on boards and work in companies that are fulfilling that vision, and make sure that you can stand behind all of these choices and that you're proud of the choices that you make. Because that's the other side of the thing. You need to be able to stand behind all of your choices too.
Yeah, thank you. And finally, for listeners who want to make a difference, what's one ocean action they can take to support ocean health?
Go for a swim, number one, in the ocean.
With
uh,
reef friendly sunscreen.
with exactly, reef-friendly sunscreen. Make sure that how do you get to the ocean? Make sure that however you get there is a sustainable way of doing it, right? But now, in all earnestness, the number one thing that people can do is educate themselves, right? again, so many layers. And you might be kind of like me saying like, "Oh, I'm interested in whales. I want to know everything about them." Then learn everything about them. There's so many documentaries, so many books, so many TikToks, whatever you want. Everything is there. If you're interested in, maybe let's put it the other way. Find out what you're interested in and do your research. Educate yourself about that. Ocean literacy is such a broad spectrum, and it can be from anything of like, how does our climate actually work and why do we need the ocean, to the marina trench, like the Mariana Trench, like being so deep. How do animals survive in that? Like there's so many fascinating factors there, right? But the number one thing I would say is that even if you're afraid of the water, if you're afraid of the ocean, there is something for everyone there. Something that captures your imagination, something that makes you go, "Ooh, this is interesting. I need to know more about this. How can I get involved?" There's so much information out there already. Do your research and really fall in love with it, and you will make an impact.
Yeah, that's definitely a very good message to learn as much as you can about the ocean, because you might not even know what you're doing might be harmful to the ocean. But when you, yeah, learn as much as you can about it and know what you can do, what you can change, and also how amazing marine life is, even the tiniest things that you might, when you go into the ocean, walk by all the time and you never seen it, but it's there and it's, yeah, incredibly interesting. And I think when people know it, it will be interesting to them as well.
And it's one of those things like you and I both grew up in a landlocked country. We are about as far away from the ocean as we could be. And I think you and I both, just for context, we both grew up in Austria. You and I both probably didn't hear as much about the ocean as we could have. We knew it was there, and we probably went on family vacations to the beach, but we didn't really learn that much more about it. But even us landlocked people were like, there is something out there. And we made that trek and we said, like, oh, this is amazing. I need to know more about this. And more knowledge is coming in, especially in Austria. Like there's more and more initiatives about learning more about the ocean, what it does, why it matters. And to me, it's so cool to see this difference from like 30 plus years of like, oh, when I was in school, this happened, but now I have kids talking to me and they know so much about the ocean that I'm like, geez, I didn't even know that. That is so cool.
Yeah, I think there's so much to learn. You can never know everything because
Exactly.
there is, it's just, it's huge. I mean, the ocean is huge. There's so much life in it. We still haven't discovered everything. And yeah, but we're sending things to the moon so we can discover that. But we don't even know what's on our own planet.
But I mean, that's the other part. Let's say you're interested in space. Let's say you're interested in space, right? Um, there is 100%, or maybe not 100%, I shouldn't name a number, but most of the technology that you use to research anything outside of our orbit is actually tested in the oceans. If it can withhold and withstand in the ocean, it will survive out there. And that's important. If you have a moon station, if you have a satellite, whatever it is, it needs to be able to deal with the harsh environment. So again, like I agree with you. Why are we sending stuff up there when we don't know everything down here? But it's still the ocean that actually got us there. So in my head, I'm still like, okay, I cannot forgive people for spending that much money for out there, but I can say like, look what we did here on Earth, on the water, like planet Earth, planet water, planet ocean here. Like,
Yeah,
uh, but
I mean, there's definitely some sorry. There's
go ahead.
definitely some important research going on in space as well. Like, it's good that we know some things, but you know the great thing about the ocean, a lot of people can go and explore themselves. They don't just need to watch it on TV. Maybe you're not gonna explore every ocean, so you can still watch TV and see it. But for a lot of people, it's a possibility to go to the beach and to explore themselves. And if you explore, then please be careful. But you definitely can explore.
Absolutely. And the cool thing now, there is so many ways of traveling to the ocean and being close to the sea and still be sustainable, right? There are so many ecotourism opportunities where if you're into camping, you can camp, right? I'm not into camping, but I will make my extra step in like being in an environment that is eco-friendly, right? And making sure that the resources that are used are eco-friendly. So it's, that conscious step of like, I go to the ocean to explore it. I am being conscious of like how I do that and why I do it. And then, geez, there is nothing better than the ocean. There just isn't.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for the conversation. It was really interesting to learn more about your work and about solutions out there and also marine mammal observation. Yeah, I hope to have you soon on the podcast again with some new innovations, even though we said that word is overused.